Hail cheaters, and welcome to the Always Cheating Podcast. My name is Josh. I'm here with Brandon. Brandon, how are you?
Good. Nice to see you, Josh. I feel like it's been a while. Here we are back in the preseason saddle, and we're going to get down to it, talking about forwards on this week's episode. And Josh, I feel like I have been falling all over Premier League Summer League matches this weekend. Watched Arsenal, Manchester United yesterday, Fulham, Brentford today. Just finished Aston Villa, Newcastle. I've seen like half the forwards on our agenda here score goals this weekend.
Well, and this Friday, you and I are going to Red Bull Stadium in New Jersey to watch is it Newcastle Brighton, correct? So
yes, exactly. Well, so we're going to see what Undav is all about on Friday.
Yeah, exactly. So it's good to be back. I had a personal, as you briefly mentioned on last week's pod, I unfortunately had a completely out of the blue family issue that took me away for about a week or so. And so it's very good to be back. Not ideal timing, perhaps, with the beginning of the season, but you can't always plan for these things, can you, Brandon? So that's where we are.
Didn't Keith Richards, Mick Jagger was the one singing. He said, "You can't always get what you want." Josh.
Keith might have written that, though. Most likely he did actually write that. But it's good to be back. And thanks so much today for going on last week's podcast. I really appreciate him doing that. I thought it was a very fun conversation too. You guys covered a lot of different topics on this pod. And so we've done a couple pods now where we've covered, sort of general thoughts about fantasy, about FPL. Yeah. We did a YouTube clip where you and I unboxed some old cards from 10 years ago. Yeah. We have more of those cards. We'll be doing that again very soon. But we realized it is now time for us to move forward to look ahead to the 2023-2024
we have
season.
Actual fantasy squads to put together here, Josh, sooner or later.
At some point, there have been times when we've been so focused on getting stuff out at the start of the season that I really didn't actually put together my own team until like the day before. Yeah, right. And then something like the panic starts to settle in. So we're starting. This is a 3-part season preview that we're doing. So we're mixing up a little bit this year from previous years. What we're doing now is today we're going to be doing our top 10 forwards for the 2023-2024 season. This is a definitive ranking, Brandon. This is not. This isn't just you and I, writing things down on a Word document. This is us crunching numbers, and we'll even talk about the criteria that we used. So we're going to do that forwards today. Midweek this week, we'll be back with midfielders. The end of the week, so several days from now, we will be back talking about defenders and goalkeepers. So over the course of about a week or so, we're going to look at our top 10 rankings for every position category in the fantasy game. Hopefully it's very useful for us. I know just putting this together and talking this through with you over the last couple of days, it's very useful to me just to think about, digging into the transfer market, see who's coming through, thinking about, you and I were just talking before we started this pod today. What's the situation at Fulham, right? Like what's happening? Raul Jimenez, welcome aboard, right? Like there's a lot going on that if you're not
mass
if you're
chaos.
Not, if you're not necessarily, exactly. If you're not necessarily putting together running notes for a podcast, you may not actually know some of the things that are happening right now. So so hopefully this podcast will be useful for you. And the way we're going to do this, we're going to do this countdown style. So we're going to start with number 10, our number 10 rated forward, and then we're going to move up to number 1. Okay, and this is the goal here are to think of these players for the entire season. So at mid-year, right around when the festive fixtures wrap up, perhaps we will review this and see just how right we were, which is going to be great, I think, because I can't imagine we'll have anything wrong. And I think it's going to be very cool. Well, it'll be basically like an hour-long victory lap, but I'm pretty excited about that.
There will be no tweaking of the formula of any kind, I'm sure. But I
highly doubt it. Yeah.
I like the idea of going through what our criteria was, because we are using, there are lots of Opta stat-driven tables out there, and we have just a very always cheating categories here.
Cheetah. Yeah, exactly.
Always cheetahs, and that runs the gamut from do they play? Are they going to score goals? To how much fun do you have when you actually have these players in your fantasy team? Which I feel like when I start game week 1 every season, there's always going to be at least one player that's like the player for me that I have in my squad. Who is I have them just because I think they're going to be fun. Now it's a roll of the dice whether those players pan out or not, but it is a crucial part of our formula for these position previews.
Yeah. It's like those directors. You do one Marvel movie and then you get one for you, right? You know, it's sort of you always want to have one player in your squad that you really care about. So the criteria that we use, we weighed these different ways. I don't want to get into all of that. You know, some of this stuff's proprietary, Brian. We had to, we mailed a letter to ourselves holding up today's newspaper with those rankings. Yeah. We actually got it printed in the paper. So if you go to the what is the Brooklyn Irish Times?
The Brooklyn Eagle.
We got incorporated. We had to go post our business somewhere.
It was a big day for us, yeah.
Yeah, it was, yeah. So I won't get into the actual rankings that we use, but I will list the factors, and you started to note them already. But the criteria that we use, we're going to use this across the board for all of the different position categories. But we'll focus on forwards in this week's pod. It's historical performance, and that doesn't necessarily mean just the Premier League. That's a mix of performance in the Premier League or kind of outside. Like someone like Nkuku, of course, is a terrific talent. Someone we're really excited about, want to see him in the Premier League. Obviously, has no Premier League performance category, but we don't want to ding him completely for that. Obviously, even though there are obviously stories of Bundesliga imports who have not worked out. Although, of course, there's plenty of counterexamples to that too.
Certainly, none of them went through Chelsea, did they, Josh? That never happened.
Yeah, exactly. I can't think of any outside of
name a few.
One of his teammates. Exactly. Yeah, one of his former teammates. High ceiling. So basically, and again, a lot of this is fantasy focused, right? And so could you captain this player, right? I think that's a big factor. Is their ceiling high enough that you could really consider captaining them? High floor is another factor that we thought about, and part of it here is rotation risk, right? For a lot of these players, the floor is quite low, right? Right. I mean, Julian Alvarez is an incredible talent, but his floor is pretty darn low when you consider there's a good chance there could be a lot of one-pointers, thrown in there. So that was a factor as well. Value, right? Just what kind of points do you want to expect? What do you expect from for their price? Are you getting a good value? In some cases, like Holland, it just doesn't matter. But in other cases, it's a pretty crucial factor. Squad quality, and to me, I think this is an important factor. Especially because people move around a lot. So a lot of the players in our like a lot of teams have changed too, right? I mean, you look at the way that Aston Villa have changed under Unai Emery, and I think that's something that's really important to consider when you think about someone like Ollie Watkins, right? It's how much he's going to be helped by having just a much better squad around him. Is he fun to own? As you noted, we needed a little talisman, quotient thrown into our ranking systems, and then we basically looked at a bunch of risk factors, right? So risk of injury, risk of rotation, risk of suspension, risk of possibly leaving via transfer. Looking at you, Harry Kane, right? So there's a lot of different risk factors that we wanted to weigh here as well. So so we've kind of put it all into a stew, a cosmic gumbo, if you will, Brandon. And we came up with our top 10. So this is what our numbers spit out, Brandon. So, do I want to, was I surprised, to see where Holland ended up in this top 10? You bet I was, but it was pretty interesting when it all came together. So we're going to start with 10 and move our way up to 1 in this ranking.
Yeah. And genuinely, there are some surprises and some not so surprises in this, but putting it together, I think we agree. We learned something at least about our approach to evaluating players, and then basically, there's one player in particular that is really challenging me in how I have put my teams together historically. So I want to talk a little bit about that. All right, so I'm looking forward to going through that top 10. Let's do a little bit of housekeeping before we get to that table. Super League. League code. You all listening to Always Cheating need to be a part of the Super League. It's growing day by day. The code is A63 ECL. So if you're a listener to the Always Cheating podcast, this is free and open to everybody. Or just go to alwayscheating.com. There's a big auto join link right at the top of our homepage. But again, that code is A63ECL.
I know. I wish they'd let you customize those, right? Wouldn't it be cool if you could just go to use, like one of those deals, like use code cheating at checkout, right?
Yeah, right.
It's like
an 800 number.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to talk about the hub in a second. You just get to use code always, right? Nice and simple.
Right.
Very easy. But yes, Patreon, patreon.com/alwayscheating is where you can support the podcast. Again, we're moving through this stuff very quickly this time around, Brandon, because we really want to get into these rankings. And we know that sometimes this housekeeping section can go a little long. But talk strategy. I got some very nice notes from a lot of people on Discord over the last few days. And so very, very, very sincere thank you to everybody as related to me being out for a while. And you get an extra podcast each week. We have a million different mini leagues, some cash. Brandon, we don't condone that cash league. We would never do that ourselves. We don't even run a cash league, Brandon. But we know
money.
some. I don't have any. We don't have any money. Okay, but in theory, there are some cash leagues that you could join out there, or just leagues that are fun. I know our friend Eric Sibbles proposed this kind of unique way to play that I had never seen. Like I never heard anybody describe it that way before. And so
you can only his idea was you can only captain a player once throughout the entire season. And so if you captain Holland game week 1, you can never captain him again. So, hey, good luck with that admin, Eric, but I'm excited to be a part of the league.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very 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 fun idea, and I'm sure that's not a new idea, but it was new to me, and so I think that's a fun one. And so lots of really cool stuff happening there. And again, extra podcasts each week, and we really we listen to our patrons. Our goal this season is to have a lot more guests on the pod this time around. So have lots of different voices joining us for those midweek pods as the season goes on. Yes. And thank you to a couple of new Patreon supporters, John Harvey and Emery Saka, for joining this week.
Yeah, and we are very excited to partner with Fantasy Football Hub during our preseason content for FPL. A lot of you have heard of the Hub, and a lot of you have used. We were talking with Dave last week. He's a longtime user of the Hub. If you're not familiar, it's really a one-stop shop for all of your FPL needs in terms of rating your team, looking at team reveals from some of the great fantasy minds in the community, pulling up Fantasy Football Hub's amazing contextual fixture ticker with their own type of fixture difficulty ratings. And the future is here, Josh. We're going to talk about the Always Cheating proprietary AI that has generated fun factors for forwards going into FPL. Football Hub legit has an AI backing their system, and it's free for their members to use to get your FPL teams rated. And amazing offer from Fantasy Football Hub. If you don't win your mini league and you're a member, you will get your membership feedback at the end of the season. Terms and conditions apply. The deal for you, the Always Cheating listener, is you can try the Hub 50% off of your membership at any tier. So just go to fantasyfootballhub.co.uk/always. There's that beautifully elegant code word you were talking about, Josh. fantasyfootballhub.co.uk/always for 50% off membership at any tier. Highly encourage you all to check that out.
Yeah, 100% agreed. And I know Dave mentioned the team reveals when he was on last week's pod. And it's just, as Reddit is at war with itself, and Twitter is kind of the same way. And it's like I think websites are back, Brandon. I think we need more regular websites. So fantasyfootballhub.co.uk/always where you can go. So let's take a break. Then we'll get back. We're going to run through our top 10 forwards for the 2023-2024 FPL season. All right, Brandon, we're back. So if you skipped all the way ahead and you missed our description of our proprietary model and us mailing ourselves our Dewey defeats Truman newspaper, whatever we did to make sure that no one can steal this model from us. I think I locked the Google sheet. That's all I did. So as long as you don't know my email address,
you got to get that dual factor authentication going. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, we need 2 factors. So, but yeah, if you Go back to the 6-minute mark where we talked a little bit about our formula. But once again, we're running through our top 10 forwards. This is for the entire season, Brendan. You'll see why I note the entire season right at the start here, because one of the things you and I went back and forth on a little bit was what to do with the Brentford forwards. Mm-hmm. And Brentford are a very interesting team because they are basically the model club, right? It's like brilliantly run. They've got a great manager. They have a lot of plug and play options. They buy well and kind of consistently exceed it. They're just like a very easy club to support, like a great second club, right? It's like I feel like if I'm just watching if I'm watching Brentford play virtually any team, I'm sort of pulling for Brentford in that match, right? Assuming I can turn my fantasy brain off, which is pretty hard, but I do try. But they have two forwards. So our top 10, we're starting things off with a little. We're always cheating, Brendan. We're cheating a little bit right here,
so true.
Right
it's
here at
brand.
The start. Yeah. So 10th it's a tie for 10th between Ivan Toney at 8 million and Johan Wissa at 6 million. Mm-hmm. Ivan Toney, all-around brilliant player, as we all know. Very fun player to watch, right? A little bit like Gabriel Jesus, very willing to track back, unselfish, happy to, he's a great passer. Had 20 goals. He's a great pen taker, too. 20 goals and 4 assists last year. So it's kind of, it was his second year in the Premier League, and he had a pretty good freshman campaign and then really stepped it up last year. But so this all sounds great, Brandon. What's the catch? Why is he 10th on our list?
Yeah, our man is suspended until mid-January, January 17th, which puts us at game week 22, I think, is when he can come back into our thinking. So out of 38 game weeks, that's not great. That's not great at all. So everything that we could say about how good Toney is makes no difference until after the festive fixtures have come and gone. And now this could be an interesting opportunity for us. There will be lots of unmanaged fantasy teams that we're trying to leapfrog at that point of the season that won't have Toney, and we could use that to our advantage. I wonder if people who aren't paying attention might sell him off at the start of the season. We can get Ivan in January at like 0.1, 0.2 cheaper than we could at the start of the season.
I wonder. That's a good question. At least, somebody will probably bury him, or like a big Brentford supporter. So I don't know. Maybe there's.
I haven't seen any like auto pick versions of teams with Toney in there, and the red flag that you immediately see, I think, is it's not going to be that big of a factor. But Wissa, who he looks pretty decent against Fulham in the summer series. Today they were playing in Philadelphia. Fulham won 3-2. It was an interesting match, but Wissa was very heavily involved, and Bomo playing out on the right in a supporting role a la Mo Salah, with Wissa being more central, and I saw him often at the back stick, doing a little bit of cleanup, sometimes dropping out to the 18 to pick up the ball. And here in our notes, Josh, that he kind of had a surprising emergence toward the end of last season when Brentford needed to call on him. And even during Brentford's first campaign in the Premier League, Wissa would pop up and seem to be pretty productive whenever he would have a substitution. So 100 points he broke into that club last season.
I think he had 111, I think, all told.
That feels like, I love numerology, Josh, and 111, that feels like a good omen.
Do you love numerology? I didn't know that. This is news to me.
Well, wait, here's the thing. Okay, so
what's your favorite number?
7. No, 5. Yeah.
What's your what day were you born? Were you born
I'm September 5th, so that's where 5 comes from. Yeah. I'm thinking we've got 7 on the brain because
you love Mickey Mantle.
He scored, but here I'll blow your mind. So Wissa scored 111 points last season. He scored 7 goals with 4 assists. 7 plus 4 equals 11, which is 1-1. So you've got 111 points on 11 attacking returns. Wow. Okay.
I'm just saying. It's all lining up. Yeah. And he's cheap, right? He's 6 million overall. I mean, he's very affordable. I mean, it's always hard to tell when you're looking at transfer rumors. I was trying to look before this pod. I really like going to Transfer Market. It's a great spot to like. They did this thing where they kind of weigh all of the transfer rumors that are out there, and so you can kind of get a sense of like, oh, okay, Man United are looking at who's that 20-year-old that they're looking at right now. It's like, okay, there's a 70% chance of it happening, or whatever. But it doesn't really seem
Højlund,
like Brentford are
about, right?
Yeah. Yes. And it doesn't seem like. At the moment, at least, that you never know, right? Because the last couple of weeks of the transfer window, things can change quickly. But it doesn't seem at the moment like there's a eminent replacement for Wissa coming in. And so, $6 million forward on a, kind of borderline top half of the table club, that's a good price. And he had two goals and 1 assist in the final 3 matches last season once Ivan Toney began a suspension, right? So he kind of immediately stepped in and started producing. He was reclassified as a midfielder. Now he's a forward in the game. So that does leave me with 2 questions for you, Brendan. Sure. I'm going to go back to Ivan Toney for a second here.
Okay.
Question number 1 is, does Ivan Toney's price drop below 8 million by the time he returns on January 17th, or is he still 8 million?
Right. Does the game actually lock his price with the red flag, or is he subject to market changes?
I guess I hadn't even thought of that as being more of a technical question. I was just curious whether you thought his price would drop, but maybe that is a technical.
Often I'm inclined to not give the quote unquote casual players of fantasy a lot of credit. In this case, I do think you have to be living under a rock to not know that Ivan Toney has had this major historical gambling suspension. And so I genuinely don't think his price is going to drop. If it does, it would randomly be by 0.1 through maybe some bot involvement of drafting teams. I'm not sure.
All right. So question 2 is then, so he's back for, I think you said game week 24. Is that right?
22.
Like that? 22. Okay, so that's you're getting close to, it's almost half the season, a little less than half the season. Do you think, and I assume once he gets back, he'll be slotted right back in. He sort of left on a pretty positive note, with the club. Do you think that Ivan Toney finishes in the top 10 for FPL forwards in terms of total points this season? Does he crack the top 10 even on half a season?
Just to preface that, I do think it's a very fascinating situation for the club Brentford to be in, because what do they do? So Ivan Toney really is integral to the club. So he's missing half the season. Would they bring in a new number 9 to fill in? Because then that's kind of a knock on Toney.
Doesn't seem like they are.
And he couldn't. I'm just saying, like, from a personality perspective, that would put Toney in a miserable position, because he'd be like, well, now I have to fight my way back into the team. Now, granted, you could say, like, well, you deserve it, Toney. Like, you got yourself into this situation. So it actually does make our position as fantasy managers pretty cut and dry. I agree with you, Josh. Not going to bring anybody in for all these reasons, and makes Wissa and Mbeumo really interesting options. How fired up is Toney going to be? He seems to be, he and Mitro have faced off in the championship and in their West London derbies, and he has a similar sort of fire in his belly for scoring goals and just winning, I think.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised to see him in the top 10 if forwards who just came back into the division like a house on fire with a point to prove. He is going to be, I assume, doing some pretty high octane training while he's out of the first team. It's going to be
like, I'm thinking Rocky 4. I mean, his name is Ivan.
Yeah, he's doing all the
Ivan
under
Drago style.
He's under the water in a swimming pool, like throwing punches and whatnot. Now, match fitness is like a whole thing. And now, is that a worry? Like, if he comes back, he's not going to be fully match fit. He doesn't feel like that sort of player to me. That's
he probably has to stay away from the club too. Yeah, so that's a good question. I don't know, but to focus on the present, I think. Johan Wissa is only in 3.8% of teams right now. He's 6 million. They have 3 home matches in their first 4. Right, they play Spurs, Palace, and Bournemouth at home, and Fulham away in game week 2. So I wouldn't be too scared of that match. I think that he's probably. I mean, obviously, Mbeumo has been talked about a lot, but I think that if you're looking for a cheap forward, I think Wissa is Wissa or Vissa. I'm going to go with Wissa as an American to Mangle's words, right? But I think that he could be a really interesting punt. We talked about having one player for you at the start of the season. And I think maybe you go with him. I mean, he's also 0.5 million cheaper than Mbomo. So if money is a factor, that could be something to weigh as well.
Oh, yeah, and he's only, I would say, I'm looking at Edouard in my current draft, my hastily put together draft, and he's only, the other way to look at it is he's only 0.5 more than somebody like Edouard. So, and that's where these ratings come in that we've put together, like team quality. The Brentford team quality we would rate more highly than a team like Crystal Palace. And Thomas Frank he doesn't play. I guess he did some fiddling with his midfield last year, but on the whole, I think he likes to stick with his attackers in a particular formation.
Yep. Yeah. I think it's worked surprisingly well. Maybe because they don't tend to have European commitments, and so it's a little easier to stick with that, right? You just can't do that with like we'll see what Arsenal do this year, right? When they have Champions League matches again. We'll talk more about that with Newcastle too, because I think that's a really important thing to consider. But let's move on to player number 9, Brandon. Drum roll. Julian Alvarez is our number 9 player, a 6.5 million Man City forward who would be starting for literally every other team in the Premier League, and is, I don't know, probably going to start. I mean, like they have lost a number of very good players over the last couple of weeks or the last month or so. I mean, many of them to Saudi Arabia, and so I don't know. I mean, at the moment, it's just hard to say, right? He had 9 goals and 3 assists in the Premier League last year, just to get into the numbers themselves. 17 goals and 5 assists overall. I think that's important to note. I mean, he really was terrific. And he's one of those players who also did a lot in the World Cup, right? He played great in the World Cup as well. He could very easily make a mockery of this ranking, right? Being only 9th overall at 6.5 million, playing for Man City. But he also needs to show that he'll be a consistent enough starter to have every week FPL value. It is very unfun to go into a Premier League season. Yeah. You have done. I remember you did this with. I can't remember who the player was now, but I think it was an Arsenal player, and
it's probably Saka. Back in the Wenger era, Saka.
Yeah, it was somebody who basically it became a very hot fantasy asset, and then just literally just stripped didn't start game week 1. Yeah. And it's just always an annoying feeling to not have a player that you feel confident is going to start week in and week out. And some people are more tolerant of that than others. I really dislike it myself, just because I find it so unfun to be stressed out about it. Going into the weekend. But what are your thoughts on Alvarez? Either in terms of starting spot or just in general.
Well, so Kevin De Bruyne there's an impact that his fitness this season I think could have on our fantasy teams, because in the Champions League final, De Bruyne goes off and Phil Foden comes in and plays in his position, does really well. But we saw in many matches where De Bruyne didn't start in the Premier League, Pep would start Alvarez alongside. Playing off of Erling Haaland. So you could get Haaland and Alvarez starting together. So again, with De Bruyne's, fitness and his hamstring, we don't know how well that's going. Is Alvarez set up to get more minutes this season? He very well could. And at 6.5, I think it's a great price. There is this temptation to bring Alvarez in game week 1, and he's just kind of there waiting in the wings for when you need him. The problem is the way the game is played is you'll probably just end up leaving Alvarez on the bench when he goes off and start him when he doesn't play. That's generally the Murphy's Law that happens there. I think the 6.5 price tag is really sexy for Alvarez. Additionally, how many Man City players am I even going to have in my team? Right now, I only have 1.
Yeah.
So I feel like there is room to take a chance on Alvarez. I like him, and he is captainable, particularly if there is a run where Haaland has some injury and we know he's going to be out for a couple of weeks. Alvarez becomes a very captainable differential player.
Absolutely. And a popular Game Week 38 captain among some people who are trying to be a little bit different. And, Haaland didn't end up the end of that season for Man City was the ultimate chaos. It was really, you couldn't own anybody at the end of last season. But I think that what makes him extra valuable, although it does hurt him as an actual forward in fantasy, is a lot of his value is the fact that he could play minutes not as a forward. And so that does ding him a little bit, right? Like, Gundo has left. Mahrez has left. There is space, right? He could, in theory, just play on the right. Right? Yeah. He could play as a right. He could start on the right wing, possibly.
Right. Gabriel Jesus did that for a while before he left for Arsenal, and he became a fantasy asset there where he wasn't at Man City for a long time. So that's an interesting thought, too. You could also easily make the argument of it doesn't matter if Alvarez starts or not. So he scored 10 goals in total last season in the Premier League, and that was on how many starts? Let's see. I'm pulling up his profile right now. He started 13 matches, 9 goals, 3 assists. He overperformed the XG. Could he just come in off the bench every game week for you and have the opportunity to score a goal? That is why he appears above somebody like Johan Vissa in our rankings.
Yeah, exactly. That's why he appears above Vissa. Although just the way that my brain works, I have to admit I would be a little more inclined to have a player like Vissa than I would Alvarez. part of it is I feel like there could be times when I want to have 3 Man City players, and maybe I want to have. Haaland is just going to be a given in my squad. There's no beat around the bush there. He's going to be in my squad from game week 1, and probably will have a defender. Maybe not. Right. I honestly don't. We'll wait until we do our defenders a week from now. I'm going to give myself another week to stress out about what I'm going to do with my defenders. But sort of, you don't want to necessarily be in a position. This happens sometimes in fantasy where you look for a low cost route into a really good team, and then suddenly you're like a little stuck. You're like, man, I really wish I could double up in the Man City defense right now, but instead I've got to solve this Alvarez problem first, right? I've got to move him for someone to free. And so that is a factor as well. Is there, is his value over a replacement Man City player, enough, or is it actually a net negative in the end? So I think that's a factor as well. And so I'm just not sure if I'm going to have him in game week 1, but I think he's a player who I think will benefit from the Community Shield. I think I finally said it the right way. I did not say Charity Shield, which I always want to. No, it hasn't been that for like 10 years, maybe longer. The Community Shield, because I think we learned a lot last year from the Community Shield about players like Haaland. And so if Alvarez is starting on the right in the Community Shields, I think that probably will make me and many others really strongly consider him from game week 1. And again, he could very easily end up being a top 5 forward this season if things break the right way.
Yeah, the only preseason match that City's played that I'm aware of, Cole Palmer was playing out on the right. So, but Alvarez did start in the 9. There with Haaland coming off the bench and scoring a couple of goals. But he already has 1 goal to his name in the preseason. So we're off to a good start.
Okay. He's a fun player, too.
He's fun to own. I feel like he's high, even with the uncertainty,
he's high in the
right?
fun factor. Yeah. Easy player to like. Easy to root for. I like him. All right, move on to number 8. A player who I owned a lot last year, and I kind of bet on the wrong horse, so to speak, when it came to Newcastle forwards. But nevertheless, a very talented player who did well in fantasy, and I think could do even better this year. And that is our man Isak. Available for $7.5 million in the game, 10 goals and 2 assists for Newcastle last season. Doesn't seem like much, but he effectively only played half of last season. He missed most of the first half with a leg injury, the mysterious thigh problem that you hear so much about, Brandon. He's reasonable price and should be a consistent starter. Question is, are you getting a kind of a little bit Alvarez style, but on a team that doesn't quite score as many goals? Are you getting a reverse out of position player, right? So are you getting someone who's classified as a forward in fantasy, but is really playing more like a left winger, which he did a lot down the stretch last season? And does it matter, right? Because Newcastle are going to have this kind of 2-man front of the line, right? Yeah. And they're both players you'd expect to score a lot of goals.
What was funny is watching the summer series. The game tonight was Villa-Newcastle, and Villa came out of the gates and was battering Newcastle and scored 2 goals on them. And then Elliot Anderson scored a lovely goal, followed by Isak. Now, Wilson's on the bench. Isak is kind of playing more the central striker role, and he scores this like fox in the box, like clean up goal. And I'm like, well, I don't really know what to make of this. Isak hasn't really been super involved, making his own chances, but here he is getting the returns. This is what we value as fantasy managers. Then, second half, Isak goes off. Callum Wilson comes on. Anthony Gordon gets the ball, shoots across the goal, forces a save from Olsen, and Wilson scores the exact same goal that Isak scored in the first half. And I'm like, guys, you need to help me make a decision here. Now, based on what we're going to find as we go through the rankings is Wilson will make an appearance here. Isak's challenge this season is, can he win us over as being as reliable as we want / need him to be? Because that would be amazing, because he's a little bit cheaper. But you hinted at this too, the Champions League campaign that Newcastle is going to have to wage, and how Eddie Howe has treated the flexibility of having both Isak and Wilson at his disposal. It's going to be Pep Guardiola levels of frustration of what is the Newcastle front line going to look like week to week in the Premier League.
Yeah, and they have a tricky start of the season as well. I mean, if we were just weighing these based on the first 4 or 5 fixtures, I think these guys, Isak and Wilson, would probably be lower. I mean, I guess Isak's already pretty low, but looking over the lens of the entire season, I think it makes sense for him to be in the top 10, because I think he's got 15 plus goal potential in the Premier League this year. But I wonder if I just popped that P. Or I guess it was a B, but it was a B that I said like a P, Brandon. It was very loud. What I think is interesting here is that, I mean, Isak and Alvarez are actually very similar players. And I think it's interesting that we're already at the number 8 player, right? The number 8 and 9 players, and we have grave question marks about both of them. Like, it shows how weak the forward spot is right now in fantasy, that we may see some new signings. We talked about, Man United. We'll talk more about some players that didn't make our top 10 because they're just the question marks are too big. That'll be at the end of the pod after we finish our top 10, a handful of players that missed the cut. But I think you really have to get almost into the top, I'd say we have to get into the top 6, Brandon, before I have like a 6 players that I feel really good about, and one of them might leave for Bayern Munich. So so it could just be 5. So let's see what happens with Isak. I do enjoy watching him play, though. I think he had that incredible move, right? The instantly famous move down the left, and that who are they playing? I can't remember. Was it Southampton or something? It doesn't matter.
I don't recall.
Feels like it's always Southampton, but let's not pick on them anymore.
Let it be Southampton.
They got relegated. Yeah,
Southampton fans aren't listening to the FPL pods anymore.
That's true. All right, let's move on to our number 7 player. This is a player that we're bringing that we're doing a little bit on faith, Brandon. We're running on faith here a little bit, and that is, I mean, not in terms of his talent, but just in terms of what he's going to do in fantasy. Christopher Nkunku comes in at 7th. He is 7.5 million. Had 23 goals and 9 assists for RB Leipzig last season. He joins his Chelsea squad in desperate need of a consistent forward option, right? Yeah. Somebody up front. He's traditionally been more of a second striker. I sort of thought of him as more of like a kind of number 10 style, just like a little, he's like behind the number 9, right? Mm-hmm. But I think he could certainly play that. He's not a very tall person for what it's worth. I think he's only like 5'8", so he's fairly short player, but super talented, great, really consistent track record, highly rated, lots of Champions League experience. Has already been doing well in the preseason. I think, did he score over the weekend for Chelsea as well?
2 goals and 2. So they put 5 up against Wrexham in a non-competitive match. And then their summer series match yesterday was against Brighton, and it was 4-3. And Nkunku was playing in the 9 spot for what that's worth. And he was running the channels, and they were looking for him. He looked sharp. And 9 goals in 2 matches, is that the Pochettino effect, or is that just the summer preseason effect?
Yeah.
I am very, very tempted to start the season with Nkunku, even though they'll have a tough match against Liverpool right out of the gate. But I think at 7.5, he could be incredible value, because I'm failing to see who the obvious player on Chelsea to start over him in the forward
You're not
position.
excited about Lukaku? Is he going to, whatever?
I mean, is he even going to bother to, like, it's going to be like the
Show
Grandpa
up,
Simpson just walks through the door, puts his hat on the rack, and turns around and takes his hat back, puts it back on?
I think so. I think he's one of those, exactly. I think it's exactly the case. And I mean, it's just like at their forwards right now. You have Aubameyang.
He's already left for Marseille or some French team.
I know I feel like the Premier League website has not like Mahrez is still available to buy. I guess it hasn't been formally announced, but Mahrez will not be playing for Man City this season. So I don't. But so at some point these guys need to get red flagged. But Aubameyang, Broya, Lukaku, this guy Nicholas Jackson, who's a highly rated signing, but a real question mark. I don't really not nearly someone that I would feel comfortable putting on this top 10 list yet.
Right.
So I think I'm with you. I think Nkunku's got the shot. I mean, Kai Havertz left as well, right? So that was kind of another player who, in theory, could play up there. And so I'm excited about how it's all going to fit. I mean, I'm just a big Pochettino fan. I've always liked him. Even though I'm an Arsenal supporter, there's something about his style. Maybe I just like the way he dresses. Honestly, Brendan, who knows? But like I am a fan. I like his personal style is on point.
And he just seems like a good dude generally.
He does seem like a good dude. I agree. So and we'll talk more about Chelsea, especially when we talk about midfielders. Right, the Raheem Sterling question looms, but I think that he's they don't have any. I don't think they have any European commitments next year either. Right? There's no. Right. They don't even have like a Europa League spot or anything. So if it works out for him, he could be starting a lot of matches next season. And so I'm with you. I'm kind of excited about him too. I think he's one of the most exciting players, and for anyone who's never seen him play before, I mean, he's a fun player to watch, right? He's really, really dynamic. He can get you point. I mean, as evidenced by 9 assists last year, right? He can get you fantasy points in multiple ways.
The point of this rankings too is to not go like one by one through the fixtures for all these strikers, because this is a season long thing. But I do want to talk about the fixtures with Nkunku, because some people will be scared off by the season opener away at Anfield. But the fixtures that follow: West Ham, Luton, Forest, Bournemouth, Villa, Fulham, Burnley, until they get to Arsenal in game week 9. So it's a great run for Poch to figure out some things, get these players confident. There's going to be goals scored in that run.
Yeah, all right. You're getting me excited. I mean, because what I don't want to do is own Raheem Sterling. So if I can find another way
there's an easy way out.
Yeah. I mean, Luton and Forest home back-to-back game weeks is really something. Yeah, you and I need to figure out. I started to look at the calendar. Man, it is. I'm telling you, Brendan, it is hard to plan you wouldn't think it'd be that hard to plan a 5-day trip in the fall, but it is like it's tricky. So we're going to figure that out. But we are coming to the UK this fall. That is an always cheating promise. That will happen. So more to come, and you and I can figure that out. It's also tricky because we don't know the exact dates and times yet, right? Like some of these. If not to get too in the weeds here, but ideally you want like a Saturday, Sunday, Monday, or a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so you can fit in a bunch of different.
So are we going to have to be in Liverpool on Sunday, or are all these matches going to be happening in London across Saturday or Sunday that we want to check out? Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. It's we often get messages from people who are like, I'm planning my UK trip, and they're like, so how do you get tickets again? And I was like, well, you plead on the phone. Yeah, exactly. You call every friend you know, and then you plead on the phone with the ticket office when you can't get what you want, or you pay through your nose for one of these. What are those things called? The hospitality.
Suite,
yeah. I mean, to be fair, we had a good experience. The
Emirates was dope.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it's
just for the private bathroom.
Like
it's
another
worth
job.
I think.
Yeah, I forgot about that private bathroom. All right. Anyway, so we're excited about Nkunku. Let's do one more, and then we'll take a break and do our top 5. Brandon, number 6 is a player who I think had a great reputational change going into the second half. I think Emery unlocked something. He'd always been a kind of inconsistent fantasy player, and he really came on in the second half last season. That is, of course, Oliver Watkins.
So
it'd be cool if his first name was Oliver, Ollie, and his middle name was Oliver. That'd be incredible. What a great name that would be. But Ollie Watkins, Brandon. Let's talk about Ollie Watkins.
He was a player that I think we did some back and forth on these rankings of where he was going to fit, and where we differ, I believe, is honestly in the fun factor. And I think I feel Ollie Watkins is more fun to own than you do.
Yeah.
Why do you think he's unfun?
Well, I think it's just a subjective thing to a degree, right?
Not on our spreadsheet that we put together. This is the most objective thing we've ever done, and always cheating.
That was the one mildly. Everything else is us. Just I mean, honestly, we outsourced this all to IBM and other. We actually
thank you,
actually,
Deep Blue, if you're listening. Big Blue.
Yeah. Deep Blue, yeah, he took a break from beating he. Well, I'm calling AIs I'm gendering AI now, but yeah, it's very I think it's we actually outsourced this to a number of companies. We got with Chevron was involved. All the Fortune 500s weighed in on. Yes. On our rankings. So, but yeah, I think sometimes it's just about the week. I am a player who's never had, in fantasy, I've never had Heung-min Son at the right time. I feel like I've never had a good run with him in my team. Obviously, he's a great player. Obviously, he's had tons of great attacking returns. Whenever I own him, he gets a red card and misses golden chances. It's just, but I recognize that it's a subjective thing, but sometimes that does point to a player being streaky, or sometimes it just points to me being irrational. But why play fantasy at all, Brendan, if you're just going to be cold and rational about everything? What's the point?
Right, but I think you're onto something with Emery coming in and basically making Watkins a more consistent striker. And it's not like making Watkins himself more consistent. It's building a better structure around Ollie Watkins, and he was part of the onslaught that Newcastle had to absorb in Sunday's Summer Series match. Ollie Watkins scored, and Buendia scored. Buendia actually looked really, really good, but it's clear again that Watkins will be the focus for Unai Emery's lineup up front. Now, Aston Villa will have European matches to contend with. Europa League, you rarely see a Premier League team in Aston Villa's position. They're usually running their full strength lineup in the Premier League and the B squad in Europe until the matches in that European competition start to ramp up. Yeah. So I wouldn't be too fearful of Watkins having his minutes restricted. But 15 goals, 8 assists last season versus 11 goals and 3 in the previous. He's growing in his attacking returns. He is getting better as the team is getting better. And I think 8 million is the question mark with Ollie Watkins, because I think it's one of those prices where you realize it feels too expensive. It feels like the wrong price, but at the same time, you're like, good job, FPL. You made me have to really think about getting him, because it's within the realm of possibility for him to actually earn that 8 million price tag or exceed it, honestly.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the price, because that is I think these rankings, I don't want them to be just about value, but I agree. I think he's properly priced. He's not good value, right? He's not right, but he is. I think because of the consistency that he's shown, right? Double-digit goals in his first 3 seasons of Premier League. I think it's reasonable to put him above Nkunku, for example, which we did in these rankings. But I think that it's. I mean, part of the problem is, well, it's not even a problem, but the question I have is, are Villa going to continue to get better and better, right? And if they are, then it's a fair price. If they're kind of a mid-table-ish squad this year, right, 8th, 9th, 10th, then that's a lot of money to shell out for a player on a mid-table-ish squad.
This is part of the exercise. And Nkunku versus Watkins is a good illustration of it, is to put numbers down to try to quantify what we do or don't like about players. The fact is, we like Nkunku more, but we don't have a volume of information. And Chelsea is on a completely different trajectory than Aston Villa is right now.
Yeah.
Aston Villa just were the much better team last season. Chelsea could turn that around very quickly this season. But we know, based on what we know, Ollie Watkins and Villa are better set up going into the season. But when we check in mid-season, Ollie Watkins we're watching you, my friend. We're watching you.
He's on the watch list. All right, Brendan, on that note, let's take a quick break. We'll get back and read off the top 5 in the always cheating forward rankings for the new Fantasy Premier League season.
What's up? It's Kaylee Cuoco. When it comes to travel, we all have a happy place. I just went to my happy place. I just went to Maui, and it was truly amazing. Priceline has always been about getting you to your happy place for a happy price with deals you really can't find anywhere else. Like up to 60% off select hotels in Costa Rica or 5-star hotels for 2-star prices in Cabo.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
All right, Brandon, we're back. Number 5 in the always cheating top 10 forwards of the 2023-2024 Fantasy Premier League season is Kodias Gakpo. It's not Kodias, but I wish it was. Cody Gakpo, welcome to the top 5 of the always cheating rankings. 7.5 million, reclassified. He's classified as a midfielder last season. Mostly played as a forward. Actually, kind of played all over the place. He even did like kind of a deep lying role. I don't know that he'll need to do that.
Outfield goalkeeper. Did he do that?
Yeah, he should have. That would have been cool. It's like often like the last day of the Major League Baseball season. If a team has nothing to play for, they'll have one guy who plays every position over 9 innings. The Tigers have done this before, where it's like they'll even pitch the 9th because the game is usually 9-3.
Is that a punishment or a happy thing?
No, it's fun. It's like the idea is that you get to play left field, center field, right field. Every inning you swap. You switch to a new position. But anyway, so Cody Gakpo is classified as forward this season at a very fair price. 7 goals and 3 assists after joining the club at midseason. He had 20 goals. It's so beautiful. I like the numbers here. 20 goals and 20 assists in 50 club matches last season. 20, 20, 50. Brendan, I know you're a big fan of numerology.
Sure am, as discussed.
So, as discussed. So I really like that 20, 20, 50. I think that's so elegant. Of course,
and 7 goals and 3 assists for Liverpool last season. 7 and 3 adds up to 10, which is another rounded
10,
double.
20, 50. Yeah, I like that. Wow. How do you like that? And so there we are with Cody Gakpo. It's 7.5 million. If you double that, that's 15, Brandon. That's a nice even. I don't know why you double it, but let's say you did. I wonder what his number is on the team. We should. What is Cody Gakpo? Is he?
That I can't recall, but this is a major
Yeah.
concern I have of his is that Darwin Nunez was unveiled as Liverpool's new number 9, which
that's just for Darwin's confidence. The man's got no confidence.
But the greatest comp for Gakpo would be Firmino in terms of the role he plays under Klopp, and Firmino was the number 9. And so it's again going back to my numerology, it's just very confusing to me.
Yeah.
But you make this point in that
he's
18, right.
Yeah.
Which adds up to 9, which is just short of a double digit. But you make the point in the notes that the biggest hindrance to Gakpo is the logjam of attackers in Liverpool. He's boosted in the rankings, Gakpo is, because he has a very good price at 7.5. He's a good player, and he plays for one of the best teams. And we would say Liverpool or...
And I would add that Klopp loves him. I think this is an important thing, right? Klopp really values what he brings to the squad. And like you said, sort of Firmino style, right? Yeah. He can play different positions. And I just think that he's going to be starting virtually all the time. And even with the logjam. And I think that even with some slight risk that he might play like a little more centrally, right? Like with Jordan Henderson leaving, this could be more of a concern now. But I do think that Alexis McAllister is going to be able to fulfill that role a little bit more as well. And so maybe that frees Gakpo up to play up front. I don't know. I mean,
sure,
it
and
is tricky.
Szoboszlai will.
Right.
It seems the conventional wisdom seems to be that McAllister and Szoboszlai will be the pivot of the midfield, or basically the anchors, whether they pivot or not.
The new Fabinho slash
Hendo,
who was the. Well, Hendo. I was thinking of who's the player who the Dutch player who left a couple of seasons ago.
It's funny because Cody Gakpo is Dutch.
Yes, you work that in your numerology.
I'm drawing a blank, but I agree. Probably Klopp's best lineup. This will be the question.
Gigi Wijnaldum. Sorry, it took me a second.
Wijnaldum, of course.
Yes.
So, Cody Gakpo being in his best 11, but if you've got Szoboszlai and McAllister basically playing their natural positions in the midfield, and then you've got Jota, Luis Diaz, Darwin, Salah, it's just going to be really tough competition, I think. Now, it's not that I disagree with you. I'm treating Cody Gakpo as let's see how this plays out for a couple of weeks.
If you were 9 million, 9.5, I'd be totally panicked. I guess again, this is where we're looking at things through a longer lens right now, right? We could have just looked at the first 6 weeks or whatever, and this would be a very different podcast right now. But I just feel like this ranking is a reflection of what I think he's going to be able to do for the squad for Liverpool this season, and that I think long term he's going to find a way to basically nail down a consistent starting. I mean, because Klopp doesn't really rotate that much traditionally, right? I mean, he'll have this kind of occasional match where just everybody gets dropped, right?
Curtis Jones gets his birthday game or something.
Yeah, exactly. Or just it's a midweek and he's mad at the Premier League for scheduling and stuff or whatever. Yeah. I love the way Klopp just throws away a game, every season. Mm-hmm. But I think that it's. I just think that in general, when they were kind of at their best, they had. And now I'm not comparing it to this guy, but I think there was a time when Salah, Mane, Firmino were incredibly consistent. And I'm not sure how much it's really behooved this team to be rotating 4 or 5 different players. It's kind of by necessity, right? Jota's had injuries. Diaz has had injuries. Nunez has stunk, right? So it's a bunch of different factors. And been injured too. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I mean, what do you think about Nunez? I mean, breaking news here, Brennan, but he will not be 1 through 4 in our rankings.
It's really wishful thinking. There is a player in there. I believe there's a player in there, but there's nothing that we have seen of him at Liverpool that would say it's coming. It's coming out.
Yeah.
If it comes, it will be a bit of surprise, but it will be there, and we knew it was laying dormant. So
just feels like he got every chance, and he still finished with 11 fewer points than Johan Wissa last season, right? And that just sort of, I don't know. I just I mean, Cody Gakpo almost outscored him in half a season, and so I don't know. I'm just not feeling it with Darwin. I wonder if he ends up getting a move at some point, or I mean, obviously it could go the other way, right? And he could score 20 this season. I mean, he's obviously really highly rated. He's only 7.5 million. So, this is we. I don't know how much we talked about this in the podcast this season, but it really is important to keep an open mind about everybody. Try to let go of previous feelings, and at the moment my feeling about Darwin is that he's like a bit of a tryhard, right? He just kind of can't get out of his own way on the pitch, right? He's just so focused on being kind of perfect, and it's maybe affected his game a little bit. He's like, so do I pass here? Do I want to be the perfect player up front for Liverpool, and so it sort of damaged his thinking here a little, or whatever, you know what I'm saying. But
he's got the yips.
He's got a little bit of the yips, I think, and so we'll see how much that affects him. Jota is another player who could be an out of position forward, right? He's a lot of movement happening right now, right? But you had Gakpo got moved. He was classified as a midfielder last season. Now he's a forward. Last season you had Jota as a forward, and now he's back to a midfielder. Priced at $8 million, which feels a little high to me for Jota. Yeah, but so I think it's pretty interesting. And then where is what's the price for Diaz? Diaz is 7.5. It feels a little high too. It would have been kind of fun to put Diaz at 7 and maybe.
Well, you'd think Diaz should be at the $8 million because I think Diaz would be rated more highly by Klopp than Jota, even though Jota's a great player. That seems backwards to me. Anyway,
what about Alexis McAllister at $6 million? That seems a little low too.
Well, I'm curious to see at Brighton how different was the way Brighton attacked than how Liverpool attack. And McAllister's not going to have pens. There's no way he's taking those off Salah. So there's one attacking fantasy route that you're not going to get. So I'm not interested. Yeah.
Well, that's fair. Maybe he's priced accordingly, right? At $6 million. All right. Well, you're giving me the yips about having Gakpo. No. Granted, I didn't do this. I mean, this is all our proprietary model, Brandon. But still, we didn't put our thumb on the scale at any point.
No.
But let's move on to number 4 here, Brandon. Number 4. I like this top 4. We got some fun ones here, Brandon. So number 4 is Gabriel Jesus. Classified at $8 million. Very, very reasonable price. 11 goals, 7 assists in 26 Premier League matches. I went to Transfer Market because I was like, how did he do in the other, because Arsenal, I think, had the Europa League last season and obviously the FA Cup, League Cup. Yeah, I think he only played one other match outside of the Premier League because he had that long injury. And so this is basically what he did last year. 11 goals and 7 assists in 26 Premier League matches. He did have an XG of 14 million or of 14 in the Premier League last season.
I like this as XG is 14 million.
It felt that way. It felt that way at times. Everyone who watched Arsenal, I think, knows he could have scored plenty more than he did. Lots of chances. I don't know if he's got that Darwin tryhard thing, or I just don't know that he's a great finisher, really, is I think what it comes down to. He's a wonderful player. He's one of my favorite players to watch in the Premier League because he's just he kind of does everything. And I think you and I are on the same page about enjoying watching him play.
Very much so. And what he gave up in goals for Arsenal, he made up in basically just hustling and breaking up, build-up play that the Arsenal's opposition is just doing so much off-the-ball work and defensive work. The question for me is that the long-term plan for Arteta? Does Arteta really need a Haaland-esque, a Haaland type of a striker up there to just score some goals? I watched Manchester United Arsenal summer series, and I mean, it would be a very triggering match to watch for long-term Arsenal fans. It's just a preseason match. I know you wouldn't read too much into it. They brought in so much new talent, but they just looked really ineffective going up against Manchester United. Where are the goals? Is it really just going to come down to the wingers again this season for Arsenal? So Jesus, I think, needs to step it up this season with goal production. And $8 million, if he can get it going and Arsenal hit their stride again like they did early last season, then I do think $8 million's great value combined with the fun factor. The fixtures to start for Arsenal are sensational. So he's on the bubble for me in terms of game week 1 consideration.
Yeah, a definite bubble for game week 1. I think the midfielders are reasonably priced, which I think is a factor there too. I mean, you can get Saka for, I believe it's $8.5 million, and so it's kind of tempting to go slightly different directions there. But again, 11 and 7 in 26 matches, so really not that many matches. I mean, you could extrapolate that out over if you played a full season, let's say, right? Let's say you played 34 Premier League matches. I mean, maybe that's a little high, but 32, let's say. You could see him get up, and with another season under his belt as well, right? So you could see a 15 goal, 10 assist kind of season from him. And, I also think that, I don't know how much this has been talked about. Maybe it already has been elsewhere, but, I think the creativity of Declan Rice and Kai Havertz in midfield, it's a much more creative midfield than they had last season. And I think that could really help him as well. I don't think he's going to have to track back quite as much. I wonder if maybe that takes a little bit of the kind of pressure off him and makes it a loser for him to just be that kind of central striker. And we saw a little bit of that in game week 38, right? When this sort of pressure was off, Arsenal were not going to win the league. And it was sort of the final home match of the season. It had the celebratory vibe, and he has a really nice match. I think he had a goal and an assist. And so I think that we could definitely see him really take off. I think that this is a player who I think could be like almost universally owned come the second half of this, come whatever, game week 15. I could see him being really, really highly owned across the board.
Right, and that's how Arsenal generally have been priced is, from Martinelli, Odegaard, Saka, Jesus, they're all 8 or 8.5, and it's the game kind of admitting 1, 2, 3 of these guys or all of them are going to go off. We don't really know which one. So get ready to move quickly.
1, 2, 3, 4. Feist said it first and best, Brandon.
Another great number song.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe the great outside of like Sesame Street or something. Yeah. And she actually sang that on Sesame Street. So there you go. All right, well, let's move on to lots more to say about Arsenal and Gabby J as we get closer to the season. Number 3 player, Brandon, is Callum Wilson, and credit to him for doing so well last season that he's always been, we nicknamed him Callum the Truth Wilson a couple of years ago, right? You and I have long fans of Callum Wilson. He's got a great smile, Brandon. He's a guy to root for. Talk about beautiful fun guy. Factor, fun player to own.
It's huge.
Even go back to his Bournemouth days.
Yeah, and he's the truth not because he is the ultimate and he's the only path to travel. It is just that Callum Wilson, for better or worse, reveals the truth to us about football and fantasy. And he definitely revealed the truth about fantasy at the latter half of last season, because there was that fork in the road where it was Isak or Wilson, and those who chose Wilson or both profited from that. And what I learned from this exercise, Josh, was you came up with the weights for all these different categories, and
IBM.
IBM. Yeah, thank you, Deep Blue, once again. I couldn't help. What am I trying to say here? I couldn't help him he kept going up the ranks. I was like, why is Callum Wilson still this high up? Because I have this bias, which is why I went Isak instead of Wilson. I expect Callum Wilson to run into rotation issues and injury issues. The way the risk factor was weighted in the grid that we put together, you could only take it up. You could only move that dial so far. And what I learned was what I'm doing in a biased way with Callum Wilson is I'm turning that risk dial up farther than it's supposed to go. And it is canceling out all of the good things that Wilson is doing.
It's a really interesting point. I hadn't even thought about that when we were. I think it's right to do it that way. I think maybe it just reflects my own thinking or something like that. But I think that's right. I think that because it's his third season with double-digit goal returns, right? He had 18 goals and 6 assists last season. So when you kind of take a step back for a second and you're like, Champions League squad, right? So talented squad across the board. Leading forward when healthy, scores 18 goals and chips in a bunch of assists last season. Little bit of rotation risk, but I think the feeling is that he's the de facto starter up front. And he's only $8 million. Like he's actually probably a little underpriced. He probably should be like $9 million. But it's sort of historically he has been more of like a 5.56 million player, and so I think it maybe it's a weight a little too low. But if he had joined from wherever, right, he joins from some other club like Holland style last season and did this, then I think he'd be higher than $8 million. I think he'd be closer to $9 million, and so I think you're actually getting decent value at $8 million for him.
Yeah, it's the truth. He is the ultimate all things being equal sort of player. Like in a vacuum, you'd want him every game week. The problem is, we have that risk dial that everyone's kind of fiddling with him. So, excited to see how Eddie Howe deploys the team week to week, how that rotation settles. And if Wilson stays fit and is playing those minutes, it could be a little bit like Harry Kane last season. Why do we not all have this guy?
Exactly. He is the true. You know what? He's the equivalent of you remember Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade. When he sees this chasm, right? He's about to get over to the cups.
Take a leap of faith.
Exactly. Take the leap of faith, and you can't quite see. You have to angle yourself, right? There's a path, but you have to look at just the right angle. He ultimately takes some dust from his bag, scatters.
It's just a bit of a cheat, if you ask me.
It's kind of a cheat. You should have had to just walk it. Yeah, I agree with you there. But that is you just have to look quite the just look at just the right angle, and you can see that Callum Wilson truly is the truth. All right,
there.
we probably burnt that metaphor down to the ground. So let's move on to our top two here, Brandon. I don't think they'll be I don't think we'll be too shocked here. But number two is, of course, Dennis Undav. Welcome aboard. Yeah. No, number two is Harry Kane. 12.5 million, one of the all-time great and most consistent of all fantasy Premier League forwards. 30 goals and 9 assists, his best ever goal-scoring season. Price is fine, honestly. Sure. But what do you think about the Bayern or somewhere? I mean, do you think he's going to be here when the season starts?
He's traveling and playing with Spurs now, so compared to somebody like Mitrovic, who was just hanging out in his street clothes with an upside down smile in Philly today.
Yeah,
but Kane is perpetually a mask wearer, so I don't know. This is it. It's a little bit like what we were saying with Wilson, where there is this dial of uncertainty and you can fiddle with it, but when push comes to shove, Kane is elite, and he will remain elite. And he's going to have a season very similar to what he did last season if he stays at Spurs. And it is also exciting if you're a Spurs fan to see, okay, it feels like they're very confident, and Postecoglou, sorry, we'll continue to butcher the name.
Yeah.
Coming in.
Nice try, though, and you just went for it. I like that.
There seems to be some stabilization happening in the club for what it's worth. Kane staying further cements that stabilization. Kane leaving, then who knows? Then I'm kind of like Spurs could be a total stay away for a while.
Yeah.
As time passes, I obviously start moving closer to the Kane is staying because there's just the news has come to a standstill in terms of the transfer rumors. But I don't, who knows what's happening behind the scenes. What do you think? Do you think Kane stays or moves?
Well,
I think it's insane, by the way, if he's not sold.
Yeah.
That's just like throwing $100 million into the Thames by Spurs.
Yeah, exactly. He's got 1 year left in his contract.
Yeah, he'll be gone for free next summer. So what are we doing?
And I also think there's something to be said for him leaving for a year, maybe even coming back and rejoining another club. It's like when you are at a job you just need to get out of, and you just take any job, right? Just because you're like, I need to get out, right? Mm-hmm. And then you can reset and think about what you really want to do. And I think that's you could see an argument for it. It feels like a soft landing for him with Spurs too. I feel like if he goes right from Spurs to Man United, you could see a lot of Spurs fans losing it. Whereas if he goes to Bayern, it's kind of like, well, he left. He's on the European mainland now. It's like a little easier to swallow. It's like when Beckham went to Real Madrid or So I don't know. I can sort of. So we'll see. I mean, it's actually interesting because if it was a Premier League club that was doing the bidding, I actually assume it would happen. I don't know why. Maybe just because it's hard for me to envision Kane outside of England. He just seems so English to me in every way, and it's sort of funny to imagine him outside of it, like such a fish out of water. But he's also great, and the fact that he is, I feel like it'd be so much easier to see how great he was if he went to Bayern and scored like 35 goals, right? It'd be like it would all be known for sure, right? I mean, he could possibly win the Palme d'Or, right? Like if
the
you went
Palme,
there,
he'd release a film in Cannes.
You know what? I was just riffing, and as soon as I said it, I was like, "That is wrong." The Ballon d'Or, of course. Yeah,
I would love to see Harry Kane's prestige movie.
Why are we putting a cap on what Harry Kane can do?
Sky's the limit, man.
I know. I'll take it back. I meant Palme d'Or, and maybe also he'll win the Ballon d'Or. I don't know. So we'll see what happens there with him. He can't be any lower than second, though. And speaking about my own squad, I sort of told myself going into this season that I was going to have Harry Kane, that his consistency is so valuable to me and was so helpful in me cracking the top 10K last season, and then ultimately almost falling out of it because I dropped him. Like it almost single-handedly came down to that down the stretch. And I was like, this guy's always going to finish the top 3 in terms of total points in fantasy. Why don't I just have him? But then now we're in this position where you could possibly have him for like a week or 2 of the season, and then he moves to Bayern, and then you kind of immediately have to basically rearrange your team and possibly wild card to figure out what you're going to do, right? And so that's really the rub, right? Like, do you want to go Kane over Salah, which maybe I'm okay with long term, but I don't like it given this risk. So, and I just don't know that because we've all seen this. We've seen this script before, right? Like, it can go so many different ways still, but there's the script where it's like he's definitely staying, and then 3 days later he's gone. Yes. Right? We've seen that happen too. So I won't believe anything until the transfer market actually closes in September 1 or whatever it is.
Totally. Dave, who is a Spurs fan who was on last week, we were talking about this and how him going on Hot Ones was the ultimate move in improving his Q score to pump up his transfer value even more. So he's doing all the right things.
Didn't you say he was like the worst Hot Ones guest ever, though? Weren't you like,
Hot Ones is having a rough season right now. John Stamos was just on, and they're scraping the bottom of the barrel.
I heard the Jennifer Lawrence one was good. I haven't seen. I'm like way behind on my Hot Ones. Yeah. All right. Well,
Speaking
let's go
of
to
Hot Ones.
Speaking of Hot Ones, let's end things here with Erling Haaland. What can you say? I hate that expression. What can you say? It's a very boring way to start describing somebody. But there's a lot to exactly. There's quite a lot to say. He is heading towards. We can now say this after one season. He's also, speaking of Ballon d'Or, he's going to win it this year, right? I mean, he broke the Premier League goal scoring record, and they won the quadruple. I don't know or the treble. I guess they won the treble, right?
I do think Messi still being alive could present and being a World Cup winner.
That would drive me crazy. If anybody but Haaland won, that would really drive me nuts. But you're right. I mean, Messi did win the World Cup, but that was in December of last. It should. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens there. That would be super annoying to me.
But as I think where you were going with that, Josh, was this is the first of many opportunities for Haaland to basically just hold the Ballon d'Or. The problem is...
And the Palme d'Or, Brendan. Again, I'm not putting limits in any of these forwards.
Hodor? It's just, I don't know. Just want to throw that one in there. Mbappe's got to make some moves like a pronto if he wants to remain a part of the conversation. But Haaland is, I think the sword of Damocles over him is his injury history, that he was somehow able to escape last season. Now, maybe and I hope it is entirely a thing of the past, and that's not something we have to worry about. But I think he ended on, what did he end on, 36 goals for the season?
36 goals with 9 assists.
Yeah. If he stays fit, 40 goals has got to be the target. If he has to deal with any injury, then 30 goals is going to be the soft target. Nonetheless,
that's the low end. Yeah, the highest ceiling and the highest floor. It's wild.
Yeah, and it's like it's one of those things where I would never suggest you get in your own head about it. Like, oh, everybody has him, so what's the bloody point of it all? Well, no. This is how did you figure Haaland's rating on the fun factor dial in the IBM algorithm?
Well, there was a tricky one. Because at some point when someone gets up to like 90% ownership, it's not fun for me. I have to say. So in some ways, there's a kind of feeling like, well, It's incredibly fun not to own him, or incredibly unfun. It is not fun to not own a player that highly owned. So he needs some kind of. And I love watching him play. I just, but. However, I will say, we went through a season with Haaland. We went through a season with him, and the first half of the season was pretty cut and dry for a long stretch. He was the go-to captain, but the second half of the season, with double game weeks, with Man City not playing as many fixtures, there were lots of opportunities to go with non-Haaland captain picks. That was not a kiss of death, and I think that you and I both didn't captain him for our triple captainship, right? I think we both went for Rashford, right? And so, he didn't break the game. It was all fine, and. The Premier League's inconsistent scheduling almost broke the game, Brandon. But that's a separate. That's for me to talk to my therapist about because it drives me so nuts. But Haaland is me and Klopp actually. We need to get together and complain about this to somebody. Don't
work it out. Just yell about it. That's.
So I enjoy having him. I mean, you are like a little more philosophical about this than I do. I mean, his ownership is literally like getting close to 90% in the game. At that point, you almost should just get him in fantasy. Like you just like have Haaland and then you get 15 additional players, right? Like it's that he's that like loaded and in terms of his ownership. But I don't know. What do you think? I mean, you don't that doesn't bother you or you're fine with it?
Well, yeah, your greatest moments as an FPL manager will be those moments when it's the marginal players that do something fantastic for your team. I always think about Graziano Pelle scoring against Chelsea, and it was just like a big moment for my rank. And those don't happen with Haaland. I mean, there will, but still, most times when Haaland, as a captain, scores a hat trick or scores a couple of goals, you're getting a green arrow. It's probably going to be a remarkably small green arrow compared to a differential thing, but you're moving in the right direction.
5-10 managers out there that don't have them. Yeah.
I guess just count yourself lucky that you live in an era in which we have VR goggles and Erling Haaland.
I think you're onto something though, because what's the point of sitting around getting mad about it? It's you just own him and you captain him most game weeks and you look for other spots and it's like something to get mad about if you want to be mad all the time. And I don't want to be mad all the time, so that's
have you ever found yourself making an argument for getting rid of the captaincy chip altogether?
Yes, I have.
This is what's happening here with Haaland, right?
Yeah,
we've gotten rid of the captaincy chip, and now it comes down to who are the elite managers who can manage 14 players otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's right. 14 is still plenty. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. There's just it's fine. And like we just said, there's he'll get injured or they'll I mean the end of last season he barely played, right? I mean he was once they were preparing for the Champions League final and they set up the league, he was a non-factor. So I highly doubt that all 38 weeks we're going to have Haaland and captain him. That's just not how the game will work. I can guarantee it. And there'll be some double game weeks and stuff as well. So that is our top 10. I hope that was useful and interesting. A couple players who just missed the cut or players to keep an eye out for. All of the forwards from promoted teams. There's almost always one kind of standout option. There has been, we had Mitro at the start of last season, and you had Tony the season before that. Even Manuel Denny from when he was on Watford a couple years ago.
Still catch him at Nottingham Forest. Still playing.
Yeah. But going through the forwards and the promoted teams, there certainly wasn't anybody that I got excited about. I mean, just to be completely honest, and so that could change very quickly. I mean, Emmanuel Denny wasn't on anybody's watch list really at this a couple of years ago, and then he became this really valuable player for like a 10-week stretch. So let's see what happens there. My eyes are. I'm very open to a player from one of these three teams, but it's just not there yet. There's a couple other Ferguson and Unda from Brighton. I think that the question is, I think Ferguson in particular could be a really valuable fantasy player this year. Just it's a little too early to have him in the top 10.
Danny Welbeck looked pretty decent against Chelsea, I will say. So He's still cooking.
Yeah, I think that A1E from Forest is another good one. I thought he came in too high though. He's priced at 6.5 million, and that just to me it's like I cannot have a 6.5 million forward from Forest. That is just that it is anti-value in my opinion. They're just not going to score enough goals.
Yeah. He finished the season strong for Forest last season, but he only accumulated 17 starts. 10 goals and 11 attacking returns on 17 starts. It just doesn't scream any value at 6.5. It's like, no, thank you.
Vinicius possibly for Fulham. We'll see what happens there. Yeah. I thought he played really well down the stretch last season.
He did a job. Like, he gets the award for did a job last season for Fulham. He was scoring that winning goal against Chelsea was incredible. And I think he can just do the big lad thing. He can do like a shadow version of what Mitro does. Raul Jimenez coming into Fulham as a 32-year-old severely concussed person at a very small fee of 5.5 doesn't scream out to me, this is the Mitro replacement. So it's still unclear what they're going to do.
Yeah, we love Raul, but I'm totally past his prime, unfortunately. And Dominic Calvert-Lewin, another player, not necessarily past his prime because that guy can still head a ball, but we have not seen it in years, and we just need to see it. So let's see what happens.
I like his price at $6 million though, Calvert-Lewin, and I think if Everton can find any sort of form, then that he's going to come into the conversation, which could be fun.
I agree. He couldn't crack our top 10. I felt like it was, we're now, this is the 3 seasons removed from that 16 goal, 6 assist campaign, where he was really, really brilliant. And then Dominic Solanke, Bournemouth, another player I had down the stretch last season. I don't know what happened. I guess he just improved, but I really enjoyed watching him play last season. You just watch a player a little more closely when you've got him in fantasy, and I just like him. He's really dynamic. He does a lot of things really well, and again, another player who I feel like came in a little too expensive though at 6.5 million. So
he's one of those players with just like an incredible frame, and you're like, this guy, he could have played any sport and excelled at it, and football's lucky to have him, but he's just not really put it all together in the Premier League.
You're right. He looks like Harry Kane, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Just huge, But So, but 10 assists from him last season is really impressive. You don't see 10 assists from forwards very often. And then finally, I really love that Man United has clearly gone out to find a young forward whose name sounds the most like Erland Haaland that they could find. And so welcome in Rasmus Højlund, a 20-year-old from Atalanta in Serie A. Not confirmed yet, total tea leaf reading, but there's a strong sense that he may join. You said you were watching a video on him a couple days ago, right?
Yeah, some people will be familiar with Tifo IRL. They have great YouTube videos, especially doing some good ones this summer on these new players and giving you a good sense of how the finances might work for these clubs and how tactically they can fit in. And Højlund, his reputation from Atlanta is he's more of an athlete and more of a body man, and at 20 years old he's very unproven at the highest level. So United buying him for around 50 million, it's worth the risk of an unproven player like him, just in how he would work on the books versus the guy's name escapes me, but the striker who plays for Napoli, who would be valued closer to 100 million and is a little bit older. So I wonder if, I for a while thought Manchester United were exciting when they were bringing in Dan James and Harry Maguire, and I'm like, let's get some young talent and rebuild the club. And that went terribly for Manchester United. Yeah. I do trust Ten Hag a little bit more, and Højlund seems like he's better scouted, but he could be fun. I think everything that seems to be happening at Manchester United right now, all signs fantasy-wise just point directly to Bruno Fernandes. I don't care who else is playing. It's just like the team's getting better. Therefore, Bruno will become the best fantasy asset.
I'm still on the fence. I feel like I'm like the final holdout. I don't know. I mean, Rashford's only $500,000 more. Maybe you get both. I don't know. It's
yeah. I don't know. I'm reading so much and I'm being preseason pilled right now. I'm watching too much of this stuff.
Sometimes that's dangerous. Yeah.
Because Rashford missed a 1xG chance at the back post yesterday against Arsenal. Meanwhile, Bruno Fernandes was just doing his thing. But anyway, we'll see.
Yeah. Osimhen, by the way, is the Napoli player.
Yes,
it's a shame in some ways because he is the one who's kind of most like Haaland. I mean, he has the physicality for the Premier League. It'd be great to see him join. All right, and I think that is it for us. Once again, we'll be back. We're recording another episode at midweek, and we'll cover midfielders there, and then we'll do part 3 of our player previews, our top 10 rankings, covering defenders and keepers. We'll do that in a week's time. So thanks, everyone, for listening. We'd really appreciate if you enjoyed the podcast. We really, really sincerely love it if you would join the Always Cheating Patreon community. It's a strange time for the podcast world, Brandon. And so Patreon is a great way to support the cheaters and make sure we can keep doing 2 pods per week. And so thanks to everyone for who currently supports our Patreon community. You can go to patreon.com/alwayscheating. I know that word community is kind of corny, but I will say when I post a little bit about some of my family stuff a couple days ago, there were literally dozens of people who reached out and said some really nice and thoughtful, sent some very nice, thoughtful messages. And so that's just nice. And I like that stuff. And as you know, Twitter turns into X or whatever is happening right now. If you saw that, and Reddit's at war with its community, right? So it's nice to have a place where people are actually being nice to each other, and you can find that on our Discord.
When we were growing up,
get extra podcasts each week.
Yeah, not to step over the promotion for our community, but we all had those friends growing up where we always wanted to go over to their house after school because like mom had the good snacks and like the parents weren't fighting all the time, and it was just like, let's go to the stable environment to hang out and play Mario Kart instead of like the crazy house where it's mass chaos. I like to think of Always Cheating Patreon as the stable house with the good snacks and the calm environment.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. Who doesn't want that, right? Everybody wants that. So that's a good. I think that's a very good point there. All right, so let's close things out. Brendan, do you want to thank our producer patrons?
Definitely,
please?
Big thanks to our producers, Mike DePietro, Trevor Ingerson. Great to see you, Trevor, last night. Also, our buddy Chris Howell, Babas Kuhn, James Holland, my shirt brother, Dave Wagner Lodahl, Nick Wright, Lazaros Llanos. And if you want to see me and Dave wearing the same shirt, go to the Always Cheating Instagram. It's quite a sight. Nick Wright, Lazaros Llanos, Jesse Halstead, Bruce Kerr, Brian Chin, Blair Jacobson, Todd Byerly, Andy Portlock at FPL Merch, Kerry Swanson, Jefferson Turner, Buffalo Wild Wings, Francis Moore, Sam Shower, Caleb Robbie, Vulgar Paulson Kruger, Alex Holcomb, James Keatley, The Saint, Bob Fox, Craig Jackson, Shalin F. Kadakia, Terrence O'Donnell, Paul Hertzig, Heath Cram, Thomas Tislov, Noah Louise, Travis Grant, and our newest producer, Julio Pena. Rate, review, subscribe so you never miss an episode. And yeah, if Patreon's not your bag, a free, easy thing you can do to support the pod is give us a 5-star review and rating on any of those platforms. Follow us on X, at Hell Cheaters, and wherever else you get your social media. If you got any big meaty items you want to run on past us, just send us an email, hailcheaters@gmail.com.
Yeah, exactly.
And all this information and more, I'll give you, hold on, Josh, I'll give you the mic in a second. Jesus, hold on a second. Alwayscheating.com is the website. What do you need to say?
What? No, I was just complaining about how many social media. I was just kind of chiming in the background. I said, "There's too many." I was like, "We're on Threads, we're on Blue Sky." It's like, who's? What am I gonna like toggle to 9 different sites? Everyone's all saying the same thing. Like I don't know where to go.
It's
like we're all defaulting back to Twitter because it's just exhausting to figure out where to go next.
Yeah, and I have nothing to add. Just like make it stop.
That's why I was just kind of chiming in. I didn't mean to make you come to a complete stop there. It was like from the peanut gallery. I was complaining.
I love
lately.
it. I love it. Stadler and Waldorf style.
Exactly. All right. Well, thanks to everyone for listening. I just rewatched Muppets Take Manhattan, Brandon, by the way. It holds up very well. Really enjoyed it.
That is
really,
the best Muppets movie. We can all agree, right?
I think so. It's the funniest, I think, and it's some of the other ones can get so sad, right? There's a kind of I don't know. There's a lot of sadness. Anyway, thanks everyone for listening. Really appreciate it. Become a Patreon supporter. Talk to you soon. Bye.